one of the things that Jacqueline mentioned was that when the pandemic started, we all went home during spring break and we all scrambled to put together materials. And I still use a lot of those materials for my asynchronous classes. We've gotten to the point where we are pretty much back in person for the most part now. So my hybrid stuff is definitely tapering off, but even in the summer, we do a lot of asynchronous teaching, especially for students that want to go do internships, and we want to be able to give them the opportunity to take classes. And because we don't know their schedules, asynchronous works better than the synchronous does. So as Jacqueline says, it's really good to make your videos short. I typically aim for between 5 to 10 minutes per video. I think that there are a couple of topics where there just was no way to break it in the middle, and the longest one I have is about 13 minutes, but certainly you're going to be better off with 6 10-minute videos rather than one 60-minute video. So if you're thinking about just recording an actual class session and then posting the recording, you're probably not going to get good results from that. Now, when it comes to making the videos, one of the things that I found when I first started was that I made a lot of mistakes. I would use the wrong words, or I would be thinking about the next point that I wanted to talk about. And so I might skip something that I needed to do before. And I would either have to go back and do a lot of editing or possibly even re-record whole sections or even whole videos. And that just wound up being a ton of time, especially if you are having to edit after the fact. So what I have found is a really efficient way to make videos is kind of a multi-step process. The first step is that I sit down with whatever I am using as my visuals, PowerPoint most likely, and I use Otter AI. And I just run through a presentation. I'm not recording video at that point, but I'm recording what I'm saying, and then I get basically a transcription of what I said, and I can edit that to create a script. Once I have that, I then set up everything for the video, and I realized that I wanted the students to be able to see me. When I first started making the videos,
hey Jack,
yes.
Could you repeat what you use again?
Otter AI. So I'm going to share the screen.
Thank you.
And I need to get off of so Otter AI is, I'm not even sure what the right term is, but it does text to speech. And so if I just want to start a recording, I can just start talking and it's going to be converting everything into text as I talk. It doesn't do as good a job with punctuation. So again, you might need to do some editing later on. But again, once you get done, you're going to have a pretty good piece of text that you can edit to make sure that you add things that you may have forgotten or correct words that you got wrong and that sort of thing. And one of the really nice things about this is that you can use this script to build the caption file so that you're going to be ADA compliant with your videos. So I'm going to stop this now. And not now. And again, I would go through, I would make a recording of my text, and then I would edit it. Once I have that, I found that, again, I didn't want the students just to hear me talking without being able to see me at least a little bit. When I first started making the videos, they thought that the videos were actually produced by the textbook publisher rather than from me, and that all I was doing was judging them on their assignments when I gave them grades. And so I wanted them to be able to see that it was actually coming from me. So I realized that I needed to have something where the camera would be focusing on me, and yet at the same time, I would be able to get all the words right. So I decided that I was going to use a teleprompter. And if you try to buy one, teleprompters can be really expensive. So I just went to YouTube and I found a video where I made a teleprompter out of a 3-ring binder, a piece of glass from a picture frame and some old Legos that my son was no longer using from his robotics kit, and some electrical tape. The total cost buying the stuff that I bought from the Dollar Tree store was less than $5. And then I would put my iPad inside of it. The camera goes in the back, and that way it is going to reflect the iPad screen. It's easy for me to see, but it doesn't show up on the video because the camera is not seeing the reflection. You do need to get a piece of blackout cloth so that you're not getting the light leaking through. So I'm going to show or share a link to the YouTube video where I learned how to make this. And again, it didn't take very long, but it wound up being particularly useful for making videos that allowed them to see that it was me actually doing the teaching. The second piece after that is actually going to be the Teleprompter software on the iPad. And so for this, I found a software called, or actually, so here's the video. If you do a YouTube search, just DIY teleprompter on a budget, and this guy says that he made his for $3. So he walks through all of the steps. It's a really good video, and that's what I use to make mine. And then the software that I'm using is PromptSmart Pro. Now, I think they also have an Android version. You can pull your scripts up on it very easily as a text file. And then it has this thing that it calls voice track. As you are talking, it actually moves the text on the screen so that the part that you are actually reading is right there in the middle. And so you don't have to worry about setting a time so that it will scroll up, and then maybe you have to wait because the part that you need to say next hasn't gotten up on the screen yet. It is reacting to what you are saying. And so between these two, you're able to make really good videos where you can avoid most of your mistakes and eliminate most of the editing time after the fact. And you've got a resource that you can use to make the caption files so that you're ADA compliant afterwards. Actually, this isn't the right class. We use a system called Ensemble to store videos. It's going to make me log in. I should have done that before the session. And so I have some that I do on an iPad when I'm doing example problems, but then I also have videos that are the ones that I do with the teleprompter. And again, I don't need my face to be particularly big. It doesn't even need to stay up for the entire video, but I do want them to see that it's me. And again, the teleprompter helps to eliminate the errors and the misspeaking, the fumbles, while also allowing me to do that. So I wanted to see if anybody had any questions about these technical aspects of being able to efficiently create videos that includes showing yourself so that the students know that it's you that's actually doing the teaching.
Jack, I have a question for you.
Okay, you're going to have to get somebody to stand closer to the microphone because I can tell that somebody's saying something, but I can't necessarily hear what it is that's being said.
Okay, Jack, can you hear me?
Yes.
Pete here. Question. Once you've got your PowerPoint slides done, or whatever your presentation material is, from that point, let's say you're doing a 5-minute video. About how long does it take you once you've got your material set, not the script or anything like that, to create a 5-minute video? Total time.
So what I often do is I actually do the script for the entire chapter at the same time. So even if I know it's going to be multiple videos, my PowerPoint is for the entire chapter. It may be a 30-minute lecture altogether, but I know that I want it in pieces. But when I go into Otter AI and I basically speak for 30 minutes, since it's giving me the timestamps, I can figure out the good points to cut it into smaller pieces. So your first step, again, is going to just do your audio recording. And then I probably spend as much time editing that to make sure that I have said everything that I want, that I haven't skipped over anything. And then once I do that, I just have to go through and do the recording with the teleprompter. And usually I don't have to do any editing after that. And if I do, it maybe only takes a few minutes, as opposed, it used to be that editing after the fact took at least as long and oftentimes longer than the actual recording. So this cuts out all of that pretty much altogether. Does that answer? So for 5 minutes, I might estimate that doing your audio recording, editing the script, recording, and then doing any post-recording edits might be about a 45-minute task.
Hey, Jack, it's Jacqueline. I've got a question and one other person has a question. So we're going to do these 2 questions and then we're going to go on just so we have that time. But so the software you mentioned, Prompt Smart.
Prompt Smart Pro.
So
and there is a free trial. So you can try it. It has all of the same functionality, except you can't mass import a whole bunch of scripts at the beginning. And it is available through the App Store on the iPad, and it looks like there is an Android version as well.
But it's basically recognizing what you're speaking, and that's what's moving the script. Is that correct?
That's right. It moves it for me. But
so you have a very clear voice. What if you have I don't know, asking for a friend, a Southern accent? Can it read what it's hearing?
I'm not sure about that because I don't have any direct experience.
Okay.
I know that when I am speaking to others, whether it's making a video or in class or a presentation like this, I am very consciously trying to be clear.
Okay.
So that may always be a benefit if you're using a teleprompter like this.
And I have one other question over here. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Tell them who you are.
Hi, this is Saurabh from University of New Mexico. Thanks so much for the presentation. I had 2 questions actually. One, I keep hearing this magic number of 10 minutes. Videos should be about 10 minutes long. Like, is there any reasoning behind that? I mean, students are watching movies which are 1.5 hours long. We can have a 20-minute video. They can pause at any time. Like what's the reasoning behind that?
I think it's just that their attention span really isn't that long unless they are particularly interested. And some people might be able to frame it in a way that their students really are particularly motivated. They want to know what's going on. But for some of the topics, especially in an introductory class, let's say that you're talking about bonds and you have to talk about sinking funds and junior versus senior and income bonds. And most of them have never heard of these things, let alone think that they ever want to deal with it. They just want to get through it. And if you make a video that is particularly long, they just get to the point where they say that they're done. So yes, I do agree that they can pause it, but if you make it smaller pieces, then they will feel a sense of accomplishment. I've gotten through this video, I'm part of the way done, rather than, yes, I'm still in the middle of this one video and it's really long and I really wish that I was someplace else. So I'm not sure that I've seen anything particularly scientific about that 10 minutes. It just seems to be a rule of thumb from people that have experienced trying to make sure that the students stay engaged.
So the course, this is Jacqueline again, the course designer that I mentioned at Georgia Tech. So she has pointed to research on this topic. So when I was doing, I do a class for our online and master's analytics, and some of my videos were long. And, you know, I'm trying to explain a discounted cash flow analysis or a 3-statement model. You cannot do that in 8 minutes. You cannot. And, you know, I mean, I'm old and I would be like, well, we used to sit, you know, it's like walking to school in the snow. Well, we used to sit in a 2-hour business law class, and if I could do it, they can do it. She was like, Jacqueline, I'm telling you, they're not going to watch your videos if they're over 10 minutes. So if you have to make it part 1 through part 4, do that. because apparently the research, really it's under 10 is what she said. It's really 6 to 8 is best. And granted, I've got some longer than that, but I really try to avoid over, like Jack said, 10, 11, 12. That's really what should be the max. And you know, these course designers who have master's degree in this will tell you that. And we're not used to that because we like to talk and explain, and I'm an over explainer. So you need to cut it down. So if you want to do the follow up, and then we're going to go to the next.
Sure.
Yeah.
Very quick. I think this is something as teachers we should look more closely into. If we are really talking about that the attention span of students is only maximum 8 minutes, you know, maybe we need to do something different in our face-to-face classes also, but that's just a general comment. The second question I had was, and this is something which I had struggled with, whenever I record my video, somehow I feel like the software selects my most awkward picture, and that becomes the click video. Is there any way of, you know, I can put my nice picture and that's what shows in the video?
So the way that I pick mine is actually when I upload it to that video server. Again, we use something called Ensemble. I get to pick the thumbnail. It's part of the, if I go in and manage this, it will allow me to pick which image, which frame in the video it will use as the thumbnail. So like, I wouldn't want to use this one where my lips are pursed and it looks like I'm trying to blow out the candle on a birthday cake. I might go to a different one. So
Kaltura and Camtasia do the same thing. They will allow you to select a thumbnail and you can create the thumbnail yourself and upload it. Jack's exactly right. But it's not just this. Other softwares allow you to pick a thumbnail too. So if you, what I do is I create a JPEG of my intro PowerPoint, and then you can embed your picture in that. But, you know, but yeah. So let's keep going. Jack, I got a note from someone here in the session as Pete is setting up for his talk. For those of you who don't know Jack very well, like some of us do, Jack, this is the teleprompter that he created. It's the most Jack Wolf thing ever. It's very Jack Wolf. And that was great. So I'm going to try to make one. I may have to borrow some Legos from somebody who has children. So yeah, okay. Thank you. All right, Pete. Great question.
Okay, I'm Pete DaDalt. I know probably about 80% of the folks in the room. Most of you have come here to heckle, so bring it. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of the big picture stuff on doing videos. And we all think we know how to do videos, or we all think we know how to do PowerPoints. And as time goes on, I found out that I know less and less about how to do it right. And I'll give you an example. The first PowerPoint video, the first video I did was back in 2008. I've been using Camtasia for about 13 years now. They closed down the state of Rhode Island because of flooding. So I thought, I'll just put my lectures online. So my first video was a 60-minute recording straight off my PowerPoint slides. And it was on bond duration. And I looked at this and I've kept it up there and I made it available to a lot of my students. And it turns out they had a person that was teaching that was so incomprehensible that my 60-minute videos was the invaluable resource for people. So the point is, first off, we all do stuff terribly at first. And sometimes that's okay, because the stuff that we do is often better than what we think it is. So I want to talk a few things about videos, and some of these are going to seem painfully obvious. But what's the saying? Is it common sense ain't? So we make a lot of these mistakes. Now, what I want to do is, okay, I had you go to Socrative. We did this. This is a fantastic book. It's called E-Learning and the Science of Instruction. So some people were asking questions were like, what's the research on that? This is the essential research. It's by Clark and Mayer, and I think this is the second or third or fourth edition. And it's talking about e-learning and multimedia. Now, multimedia is not just e-learning. A PowerPoint slide is multimedia. You have two different modes of instruction. So a lot of this was prompted by how do you most effectively do multimedia instruction? And a lot of this is going to seem extremely basic, but I think it was Socrates that said, learning is the art of enacting remembrances. I like old guys with beards, so I quote Socrates a lot. I haven't drunk the hemlock yet. I prefer cider. But the idea is that we actually do know a lot of this stuff. We just need to be reminded about it regularly. So let's see some of the things that he's talking about. And I'm going to list these, and I'm going to unpack these a little bit more. And the first thing is, don't be fancy. Generally, simplicity works best. Less is more. Another has to do with this idea of segmenting, and this has already been talked about. You're better off doing 5 10-minute videos than my 50-minute snooze fest on duration. We call this segmenting or chunking, and there's actually a lot of evidence that has to do with the students like being able to self-pace this, and then you do get a sense of accomplishments. Because if you're halfway through a 50-minute video, you haven't accomplished anything. You haven't been able to check anything off. But if there's 10 5-minute videos, guess what? You're halfway through and you've already locked down a bunch of these things. I'll talk a little bit about modalities, and that's a fancy word for saying audio channel, visual channel, and whatnot. And we tend to think that if we have multiple things going at the same time, it reinforces things. It basically screws up the cognitive processes. The bottom line is that we all like to think that our students are Mr. Spock, and we're actually more like Homer Simpson. So keep it simple. We'll talk about redundancy, signaling, contiguity. So a lot of stuff, but it's all going to be kind of quick hits. And you can actually Google this book. Just Google Clark and Mayer and multimedia, and you'll see that people have blogged about this. So you can even save yourself the book. Somebody else has probably unpacked this for you. So the first thing, less is more. Now, one of the things that is good, one of the best things about making a script and having what Jack does, he uses otter.io. I use Dragon, speaking naturally. And the nice thing about Dragon, you can train that to account for Jacqueline's Southern accent or my Milltown Italian boy accent. You can train it over time. So, but once you spit out what you're going to say, now those who know me know that I never use one word when I can use 5 instead. So you cut it down to make it simpler. And you realize that whatever you say, you can say more crisply and more clearly. And that's the editing process. Editing is the art of throwing out the stuff that really doesn't matter. And part of it, we have this whole strain of research in finance called limited attention. Undergrads are the poster children for limited attention. They've got a certain amount of cognitive process, and that cognitive load that they can handle varies. If it's after lunch and they've had a lot of starches and the blood is going to the digestive tract, they can't handle a whole lot. So keep it simple. When you finally learn how to do things like Camtasia, or you learn how to do PowerPoint animations, I've got a 12-year-old son who's learning how to do video editing, and he puts all the bells and whistles in. He loves doing these fancy effects. That's kind of good for ooh and ah, but it's not good for teaching because that directs attention away from the main measure. Likewise, ear candy. songs and music and stuff like that. It's all kind of fun to do that. And I've shared some of my videos with Jacqueline and Jonathan and Jack, and I have some animations coming. So I've cut those back a lot. They're fun, but they're not effective. Minimal animation. So keep it simple. The minimal that you can do, the better. Okay, so next thing, segmenting. Shorter videos are much more likely to be watched. I know a couple of us here have read the book Brain Rules, another one of my favorite books. Studies show, how long do you have before you lose people's attention? How many minutes do you think? How long do you? Okay. Jonathan, you got a good reach. Smacking. Okay. Yeah, so you got 5 minutes. And so part of this is if you don't do something to re-engage them in 5 minutes, you're screwed. Less than 5 minutes, try for 10. Shorter videos, they're easier to make. You can rip off a 3 or 4 minute video if you've got 10, 15 minutes on your time. To do a 30-minute video, that's a lot of work. We've talked about self-pacing. I want to talk about modalities. We think that if you've got text and graphics, it's better. When you're reading and when you're looking at graphics, you've got two different parts of the brain functioning. They get cross-wired. So if you're talking a lot, just have a simple picture up there, not a lot of words. Be careful with animations in text. It could be good or bad, and in the book they talk about which is which. The worst is text and audio. Don't read the words on your slide. We all know this, but we all do it. Okay, redundancy. Don't give the same stuff. Yes.
Regarding text and audio, let's say we are recording a video where there are slides, and so audio would be your voice, and the text would be slides, even though you're not reading from the slide. Is that okay?
The point is you want to have, if you have them engaged in reading the slides, at the same time you have them engaged listening to you, if you do have a lot of stuff on those slides, you're going to want to rephrase it. Now they're hearing two slightly different messages, and then we get to brain overload again. Okay.
What?
We have another speaker.
Yep.
Let's save the questions to the
Okay.
end because I want to honor the time of all of the speakers. So we'll just save those to the end if we have time, if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, next thing, contiguity. Whenever you have words or call outs or arrows, things pointing to things, keep them as close to what you're illustrating or elaborating on as possible. So the most common thing, you'll have a graph and you'll have text at the bottom explaining the graph. Try to put your explanation, take a little text box, put it as close to where you need it to be as you can. Closer is better. Make sure that your audio syncs up with what you're talking about too. Don't have a picture and then have a whole bunch of audio afterwards. Questions and feedback, put them on the same slide. Avoid captions at the bottom if you can. Okay. And the last thing I want to talk about really is signaling. And signaling, it's all about being effective. And in that case, think of it as the boot camp method of instruction. You tell people what you're going to tell them. You tell them, then you tell them what you told them. So let people know where you're going and link back to where you've been. Roadmaps, signal forward, link back, and summarize. Now, the last thing, very briefly, I'm going to talk about Socrative. At the beginning of this, you had I actually gave a little quiz there. And I use this in my online classes and on my face-to-face classes. So what I do is at the beginning of the class, I always just ask them a question. And the question is, what's your question? So now I've got a series of questions from my students. I do this as soon as I get in the class. It gives me a few minutes to get myself set up to see what kinds of things they want to see. Now, this is Socrative. It's free. They've got a paid version. Supposedly, the free version only works for 50 students. I've seen people use it. I've done it actually in a lecture with 150, and it doesn't crash. The beautiful thing about this is I go into class with a bunch of questions that are just on a Word document. So I've got 10, 15, 20 questions. And throughout the class, I pause and I just shoot out a simple one-off question that asks them to respond to what I've just talked about. And I found that it gets much more engagement. The other way that I use this, in my classes, they are not allowed to leave unless they've given me their exit ticket. So at the beginning of the class, I tell them that in order to leave, they owe me a good question. And that good question, they're going to give me on Socrative at the end of the class. That forces them to engage a lot more with the material and actually come up with good questions. And they find that that has done a huge amount for engagement. So that's pretty much all I've got. So I'll open it to questions of anything here.
So let's go ahead and let's take the questions to the end of this entire session, if that's okay. That way Max has time. So next up is Max. If we can go ahead and get him set up, and then we'll have some question time at the end for all of the speakers. Yeah. Yes.
Hello. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, Jacqueline, thank you for organizing it. And I wish you were there in person, and I'm looking forward to meeting all of you maybe next year. So actually, I already learned a lot, and I need to make I plan to make a video after this because I'm actually missing the class. And I'm going to take the approach, I'm going to break up the video. Instead of having one 50-minute class, I'm going to make a 5-10-minute ones or even smaller ones. So thank you for your piece of wisdom so far. I think some of my material will integrate with what we're discussing. So the big piece for me has always been how to motivate students. You know, how do we engage them? How do we keep going? And with the shift to the online medium, that was particularly a concern for me. So some of those lessons I've picked up just up before the virtual setting, but then they were really amplified once we went online. So many of the lessons I learned, it was actually from my coach right here. Let me see if it's my coach Mike. And so he was my weightlifting coach. I was new to weightlifting in my early 30s, and I didn't expect to make much progress, but it was his methods, with how he approached it, that I saw impressive success, which I attribute really all of it to the coach. And what he did is he focused on behaviors rather than outcomes. So instead of me thinking, okay, I'd like to be able to deadlift 400 pounds like one day, that would be hard to stay motivated because it's so far out. I don't exactly see how I'm going to get there. And I don't know what I need to be doing today exactly to be moving in that direction. So one of the goals we had was I wanted to improve my body composition. So I wanted to lose 10 pounds. And instead of, he told me, Max, forget gain on scale, forget thinking about the outcome that you want. Again, it matters and we want it, but we have goals need to motivate. And the moment we don't have a full control over them, we become less motivated. So instead of thinking of the outcome, forget about that. Let's think of the behaviors that are consistent with reaching those outcomes. And let's set goals around your behavior that we have control over. So for example, we would have drink 80 ounces of water every day, eat my meals slower and eat till I'm 80% full, go to the gym at least 3 times a week. Now, each of those goals I had full control over. And as I would reach them, they would become satisfying. In fact, the discussion we just had about segmenting, and we had a gentleman from New Mexico who asked the question, why does it matter if it's one 50-minute recording or 5-10 minutes? That's a great question. And those are the things that I would think about is how do we motivate? Why does it make a difference? And it's as we hit those goals, we get a sense of satisfaction and gives us motivation to keep going. In fact, in Atomic Habits by James Clear, he discusses something like that. So now this was in the gym, and I'm bringing up the gym because I think the fitness industry leads in how to motivate because they need to do that. And then they establish behaviors that support us reaching certain outcomes we need. So well, now taking into the classroom, I used to be obsessed with focusing on outcomes. I would tell my students, in life, all that matters is how you perform. And because of that, we will set only outcome goals. So it's going to be just all that matters is how you do on those big exams. Sure, here's homework, but you get no points for it. All that matters is how you can perform on this big exam. So I used to be obsessed with this outcome goal setting. And what I failed to consider is how does it motivate students? And as students fall behind, as they don't see themselves hitting that goal, do they lose motivation? So instead of now thinking, okay, instead of you setting goals like get an A in class or ace the final, instead think of the behaviors that students have control over. So they can say, I'm going to study 2 hours a day. Or we as instructors, we can set those goals where we say, okay, attendance matters. Show up every day. Here's homework that you need to complete, and you get some points for it. You can meet with study groups weekly. And as I started to shift from those outcomes more so to behavior goals, I mean, I still had exams, but as I started to infuse those behavior goals and gave students a sense of control over their grade, over their outcome, what I saw is that they became more motivated and they would put in more hours. And just to test myself that I wasn't imagining this, I did a quick check. And at the beginning of the course, so something I'm about to touch on, specifications gradient, that focuses more so on behavior goals. And as I revealed to students, okay, this is how the class is structured, that you will have control over the goals that you hit. And then they were asked, they're polled, how many hours a week do they expect to study? It shoots up by about 15% compared to the section that doesn't realize that. And in fact, if you are curious, if you are familiar with growth mindset by Carol Dweck, I also tested for that to see that students that have growth mindset who believe that they have control over their skills, that they're not fixed, they can grow them, those students tend to do the best once they find out that we will have behavior goals in the classrooms. So in this case, in orange, those are behavior goals. This is specifications gradient setting. My motivation came from the fitness industry, from my coach, but also those books here. We got James Clear, Atomic Habits. So those pieces, his 4th law of how to develop a good habit is to make it satisfying. So again, this piece that Jack and Pete talked about segmenting and breaking it up, like this it makes sense once you look at Atomic Habits, because we need to have, it's actually not the motivation that drives action, it's actually flipped. It's action that drives motivation. If you think about you doing a small task, if you go to the gym in the morning, or just even simply just make your bed in the morning, you're more likely to go and do something else because you got that sense of productivity. I'm doing something and now you want to do more. So how can we do it in the classroom? Well, Pete talked about having that poll at the beginning, right? I bet just having this poll, just students answering the question in the first minute, it gives them a sense, okay, I got something done. Now I'm ready to do the next thing. And so I bet for Pete, it's not just that it gives them sense of what questions students have, it also gets students in the mindset and ready to go for the class. Carol Dweck talks about the importance of having a growth mindset for students to believe that they can indeed get better and grow their skill set. We do have control. We can help students change their mindset. And with that, they will be more okay to fail, to take on challenge, and to try again. And then Angela Duckworth talks about the importance of grit. It seems to be one of the most important determinants for student success in the classroom and beyond that. And in fact, Brian Payne at the University of Nebraska in Omaha, in a Journal of Financial Education in the last edition, he showed that grit also is the primary determinant of success for undergraduate students in corporate finance. So he shows that as well. So on specifications gradient, it doesn't have to be specifications gradient. Everything I discussed is like, even if I will not do specifications gradient next semester, I can still use many of those lessons. But specifications gradient allows you to really focus on that. So for example, the way I would have my class, you have a C bundle, B bundle, and A bundle. So to earn a C, students they would need to complete all the homework, pass all the quizzes, pass the first exam that tests their knowledge, complete the certification, that they put up on their LinkedIn. Now, if they do fail a quiz or exam, they do have tokens, so they have a chance to go back and try again. And then for B, they need to complete the project. They're doing a firm analysis, and then for an A, they're also doing the case. But the students now they're choosing what tasks they need to complete, and as they complete them, they keep going and they want to do more. This also falls in line, if you are a fan of Bloom's taxonomy, this does align with Bloom's taxonomy, because now to get a C, you're focusing on the first levels of cognitive abilities where you understand and remember material. So to earn a C, you need to know all of the material. To earn a B, you need to go deeper. And then to earn a C, you need to complete tasks that require higher cognitive abilities. So there is more you can touch on that if you are interested. Specifications Gradient by Linda Nilsson. She describes it really well. And so, but I tried it only because we were shifting to the virtual setting, and I was worried, how do I assess students? So as I became familiar with Specifications Gradient, I brought that in, but now I'm even using it live, and there are many benefits. So thanks a lot again to all of you hosting this. I already learned a bunch from you, and I'm looking forward to maybe next year to doing this in person.
Thank you, Max. So I have a question on the specifications grading. So is there any issue if people are only doing like some of the bundles? Are there any issues with AACSB with regard to what needs to be covered with respect to what we used to call learning outcomes for that topic? So how do you make sure that if they only do some of the bundles, you're covering AACSB guidelines for what needs to be mastered in that class?
Jacqueline, that's an excellent question. I think that's a primary concern that I would hear from from others, not from students, but maybe from colleagues, is how do we, does this mean that C students don't have to know everything? And actually, I think it's on the contrary, and ACSB so far loves this. In fact, I published an article at ACSB Insights that that mentions specifications gradient. And because now what we are doing is we are saying to earn a C, you have to know everything. You no longer get to bomb a quiz and then just earn a higher grade on a different topic. That's not allowed. Every single quiz, you have to demonstrate understanding. In my class, it's 80%. You have to get to 80%. And when students don't, they have to go back and they have to redo it. They have to meet with me, they can meet with me and work with me, but no longer can they pass a class unless they complete each one of those tasks. Now, your point is, okay, well, what about B and A? True. So now what we're doing is I'm doing fact set, firm analysis. That's not necessarily a requirement for this course. And for an A, we're doing a Harvard business case. So all of the students need to have this basic understanding, have the knowledge of all of the material. But even in a traditional setting, when my students are done, I can't point at my students and say that my C students know everything and they can apply everything and they can create with this. So in a traditional setting, I can't do that. And with specifications gradient, I've never felt more empowered to know, what does a C in my class mean? What does a B mean? So.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Does anyone else have a question for any of the speakers? So I'm going to just hand the microphone. Yep, that's great.
Tirimba Obonyo here. I'm from Creighton University. My question is in general to all the speakers, and it's on exams. How do you do exams when you're doing this online and when you've got material that's sort of fairly quantitative? How that's, somebody had to draw a graph or write an equation that's pretty easy to do. But then when you try to do that online, sort of how do you go about that, and what's your experience? What may be best practices in that regard? Thank you.
Jacqueline, can I take a first stab? Okay, so what I do is I will have the text of the question on the online exam but then I have the expectations that the students will be working it out on a piece of paper, and then that they will use an app such as Adobe Scan or Cam Scanner at the end of the exam to take a picture and upload that, and then I can see their full work just as if they were doing an exam on paper in the class. Now, on the online exam, I will ask them to put their final answer so that whatever they upload should support that answer and not something else that they may come up with in the 10 or 15 minutes after they submit the electronic exam and before they upload their scratch paper. But again, I will get all of those on Canvas. I just set up a separate assignment, and then I can download them all as a big zip file. It basically puts everybody's name at the beginning, so I don't have to worry about separate or different students having the same file name and having them overwrite that. And then I can just go through the scratch paper and decide how much partial credit to give.
Go ahead, John. John, you probably need a microphone. Yeah, yeah.
I was just going to add that that's great, and I applaud that you're giving partial credit to students. It's really hard to do if you have a class of 200 students or 400 students, which is what I have, and I end up using Canvas's ability to build out formulaic questions, and then you can vary the inputs so that you don't have one question for everybody that looks identical, and you could have 25 variations on the inputs or 5 variations on the inputs, whatever you like. That enables you to feel more confident as a professor that they're doing their exam, and they're, even if they were trying to sit next to somebody, which, you know, is a violation of the honor code and all that, there's still, the person next to them is very likely to be facing a different set of inputs.
Thank you.
I would agree with that. I would take it one step farther in that most of the learning systems, unless you're going to ask a very pointed question, a one-step question, so to speak, that you're still going to be limited to what you can do. If you're trying to get somebody to do a financial forecast where they need to basically do an entire projected income statement and balance sheet, I know that Canvas will not do numeric problems with more than one answer. So in that case, you have to go to something like what I'm saying, where they can draw everything out on the piece of paper. However, the algorithmic questions, again, if you're going to do something that's fairly simple, that is a great way to do it.
Yeah, I've actually done kind of a hybrid of that. Now I teach, one of the classes I teach is the principles class. So I will take 80% of their exam grade will be drawn from a fairly large database of questions that I've gotten from McGraw-Hill's Connect. Mm-hmm. So if they know that material, they basically can get a passing grade. But then the other 20 to 30% are kind of twisty questions, and those are the ones that separate. So that means that, I mean, those are a pain in the neck to grade, right, but I have fewer of them. So 80% of it is electronic, yeah, but I want to have some questions there also that are a little bit more involved. And it's interesting, the weak students will get fairly good grades on the multiple choice ones, and they will bomb on the more involved ones, which is kind of what you want. You get variation in grading that way.
Yes.
One other, okay.
Oh, go ahead. Well, yeah, Jack, we'll come right back to you. Go ahead. Yeah.
You guys hear me okay? This is Mark from Babson College, and I thought I knew what I was doing until I came here today, and I really want to thank the presenters for all the tools. I've taken a lot of notes and really appreciate you guys putting this class together, or this session together. The two things that I do that reduce the blood pressure of the students coming into the class, and we all have different Canvas sites. One is I turn off the buttons that I don't use, so that they don't see them. And two is I do a under 10-minute video tour of the course. So it's the first thing that they do, so that you can tell them how things are standardized, like you set up, Jacqueline, which is super helpful. And I guess my question to the group, if we have time, is I think we've migrated into the sort of evaluation area of how what we are doing has changed how the students are being evaluated. So I'm wondering about what you've observed in terms of grade distributions, And like, have those changed over the past couple of years as you've migrated to employing these new these new mechanisms? And how has that changed, any of the sort of inevitable complaints that you get after the fact? Because I think what you've done creates a lot more transparency.
Max, do you want to talk about that first?
So the good part is that with specifications gradient, I get pretty much no complaints with grades, because now the students feel those who get a C, they chose not to do the project for a B or an A. I had only complaints I did have is by those who got an A. They said that it was just too much work for them. But it also now eliminated, because now it no longer matters if you got 90 or 92 or 94%, because the points do not carry over. You can't, earning more on one quiz does not save you in the next quiz. And so you no longer have students coming at you with partial credit or because you didn't grade this properly. So the grading just became so much easier. You're just looking, okay, is this a competent assignment, and say yes or no. So,
Pete, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, two things. One thing we noticed, at least at my university, we really bent over backwards to make it less stressful on the students. We had more students that were honors than we'd ever seen by like 20%. But the next semester, I give all of my students pretty extensive prerequisites quizzes for for each class, and they count. And the typical scores on those prerequisites quizzes have run between 80 to 85, with a low of about 75. This year I had a class where the average was 50. So I think that there's a real drop off, and some of that was us, because it's hard to learn how to do this stuff well.
Well, and we were so, I know at least at Georgia Tech, and I appreciate this, we really wanted to accommodate our students, and I kept on telling myself, give more grace than you don't. And so, I'm going to believe a student if they tell me somebody in their family is sick, right? Because I may not have an opportunity. We're so overloaded at student life, they're backlogged, I may not know. I'm going to believe people. And yeah, there'll be some type 1 versus type 2 errors with that, but I'm going to believe people. And then, we were all inclined to give maybe more grace than normal, maybe. And I just think that was the right decision. And I do think that resulted in grade inflation. I do. I think it did. It did for me. It resulted in grade inflation. And I'm okay. Pardon?
It was fine.
It was. I decided that was okay, because a lot of people had a really, really rough time, and I just decided that was okay. I had more A's than I normally did, and I didn't get grade complaints, but they might not have known the material as much. But I feel like that was the right decision as far as I was concerned.
Absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, like every decision, what does economics tell us? That there's no solutions, only trade-offs.
Right.
The trade-off is that I think we need to do, at least for a semester or two, I think we need to reevaluate our expectations, because I think a lot of the things that we've expected students to know, it ain't happening. And so you have the decision, do you lower the standards? Do you do a lot of remedial stuff? Do you do some average of both? And the answer is yes.
The other thing I was just going to mention, and I don't know if you could project this laptop for me. So I have used Socrative, and people pronounce it different ways. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but I also use something called Kahoot. And how many people have heard of Kahoot? Okay, so I use Kahoot a lot, particularly in the undergraduate classes. I don't use this with the MBA students because it is very whimsical, but most of the students have seen this in high school or grade school, elementary school, and they love it. They do. And, so if you, for those of you who haven't, seen this, I'm just going to edit this, and then I'm going to, I should be able to preview it. So this is just project cash flows. What's the NPV and the IRR? And I use this, one thing that it was actually in one of the sessions yesterday about creating an economy. So I used to always do participation. So I use that idea in my class. So I've created an economy. There's a bank in the class. Because we're the Yellow Jackets, I call it the Yellow Jacket Bank of Benjamins. And so when they used to get participation points, I had this $100 bill blown up and they were earning Benjamins and so forth. And that was a part of their grade. I don't do it that way now. Basically, the bank in the economy they're saving their Benjamins that they can use at the end of the semester to buy something. I'll tell you what they buy, but Kahoot is one way they earn a Benjamin. And if they get the question right, so this is what it looks like, right? And if they get the question right, then they get 1 Benjamin. If they're the first one to get it right, they get 2 Benjamins. And so they really like it. It's colorful. You can have music being played during the class and so forth. But also the way the bank works, they can earn Benjamins with the Kahoot question. They can earn Benjamins just by raising their hand and contributing. And then I actually got this idea from our man, Pete DaDalt, right here. So some of the students, there's a variation of Excel skills, and I use Excel in the classroom. So I post in Canvas 3 LinkedIn Learning classes on Excel. There's a basic Excel class, there's a charts class, and there's an advanced class. The 2 basic classes are 2 hours. We have an account with LinkedIn, so if they take the class, it's incentive compatible. If they take the 2-hour class, that's 10 Benjamins for every 2-hour class, 20 Benjamins for the advanced 4-hour, all optional. Meanwhile, they're still earning Benjamins by the Kahoot questions and participating in class. At the end of the semester, they can spend their Benjamins, up to 30 Benjamins. Now, they may have 40, but they can only spend 30. I'm telling you, participation has gone up dramatically because I gamified it. It's now a game, there's a bank. And so what I did was I got some help from a friend of mine who's in the math department. So in Office 365, I created a form because I need to record the Benjamins and I don't want to be taking paper up every day. I don't want to do that. I created a form in Excel where you can create drop-down menus. How did you earn your Benjamin? Kahoot, answered something in class, did a LinkedIn Learning, did a 2-hour LinkedIn Learning. How many Benjamins did you earn? Well, there's 4 choices, either 1, 2, 10, or 20. And they do the drop-down menu. That gets added automatically by their login name at Georgia Tech because they're signing in through Canvas. And then at the end of every week, I update how many Benjamins they have. I'm telling you, they love it. And how can they spend them? So it used to was a part of their grade. Now their participation, for every 10 Benjamins, they can buy 1 percentage point on their final grade, up to 3. So I'm telling you, it's worked. And when they tell me what they did to earn their Benjamin, because there's a text box, and I can always verify it in Kahoot, did they do it or whatever, and I do verify it, but they'll write things like, not only did I answer a Kahoot, it's like, I'm so fly, and I'm a Jedi in finance or whatever. They really, or I'm dope, and I earned a Benji today because I knew the answer. They've really gotten excited about the bank and the participation. Yeah, but I know you had a question. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. In a way, you answered my question. I was going to ask, how do you measure participation? It looks like students self-report it.
They do self-report it, but so the Kahoots, sometimes they forget to self-report the Kahoots. So I just created a spreadsheet, so you can download reports from Kahoot. So I just download the report from the Kahoot, and it tells me for every student, did they get it right or did they get it wrong? And so I add it there and I just cross-check it. It really doesn't take me that much time. Now, when they say, I answered a question in class, and before they were writing that down on a piece of paper. It's amazing. They're truthful because I have a pretty good memory. When I go back and look, I remember that, John or Sally answered a question that day in class. The LinkedIn Learning, they have to send me their certificate from LinkedIn Learning. And I also tell them this is all incentive compatible, the LinkedIn Learning. So they can earn participation points and buy points on their final grade by participating. But if they do the LinkedIn Learning, if they've got a LinkedIn profile, when they complete that class, it goes on their LinkedIn Learning profile that I completed the basics in Excel, the charts in Excel. And I tell them, now you've signaled to future employers that you took extra effort. Now you've got these Excel skills that you might not have otherwise had. And a lot of them have done. And then I had one of my students the other day, it was the beginning of the semester. I noticed he was having some difficulty with Excel. He just wasn't as proficient. So I sent him an email and I said, I'm noticing you're having a little bit of difficulty. He wrote me back and he said, wow, I'm so grateful you noticed. And I said, well, I'm happy to help you, but why don't you take the basic Excel class? You'll earn 10 Benjamins. And I said, I promise you, if you take that, you'll feel more comfortable in class. And I think one thing that I'm not very good at, and I've tried to figure out how better is like this. I don't have to teach them everything. There are plenty of other experts that can teach our students things. So let them take a LinkedIn Learning class and incentivize them if they're weak at something. I can't teach them everything. I can't, but somebody else can, and then incentivize that, right? Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, I came across the LinkedIn Learning stuff about a year or two ago when my university got a copy of that. And I wrestled with that originally because I'm saying it's inflating the grades. So I talked to the dean and I wanted to make sure that I was on good grounds with this. And he said, well, they're learning new stuff and you don't have to teach it to them. So yeah, we have this attitude sometimes that we don't want to give out too many A's, that we see ourselves as the gatekeepers. I think it'd be awesome if 80% of my class got A's if they earned it. And what I found with the LinkedIn stuff, it's not just Excel. I've got students that are learning Python, learning SQL. Mm-hmm. I taught a class on financial modeling in VBA. There's a 2-hour VBA section on LinkedIn. So almost everyone in that class can then show that they've completed the VBA course. Mm-hmm. And as you know, that's gold on LinkedIn. That's gold in terms of applying for jobs. So if it's not LinkedIn, you may have access to Coursera, Udemy, all kinds of things. Use somebody else, because they learn more and you don't have to do any of the work. Their grades are higher, so they feel better. And if they don't do it, they choose not to do it, it's pretty clear that they can't come to you and say, I really need to get this grade. So it stops a lot of the noise. Yeah. So it's a win all around.
Well, so this was a great session and I appreciate your participation. We are going to post some of the material. I'm going to try to get all the names of the books. We'll post that. I'll post my syllabus with the deliverables, the release date and that sort of thing. And thank you for attending. If we want to ask questions, let's just hang out afterwards, but this will formally end, but we can of course informally talk to each other afterwards. So thank you for attending. Appreciate all the other speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Max. Thank you,
you.
Jack.
John Garner.
Bye-bye.
Name anytime.